Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this afternoon. Stephen, could you go ahead and advance to our title slide, please? Thank you. Welcome to our virtual information session on our summer conference on applied data science. We're going to call that SCADS throughout the course of this presentation. So if you hear us say SCADS, that is our acronym for our conference. My name is Dr. Christine Brew. I'll be joined for portions of this presentation by Dr. Matt Schmidt and Dr. Stephen Schauger. And if you have any questions, if you're watching the recording of this presentation, or if you need to reach out to us, our email is scads-apply@ncsu.edu. We'll go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So an overview of what we are going to cover this afternoon. We're going to start off with an overview of SCADS, giving you some information about what our program is. And we are then going to take a deep dive into our SCADS 2026 research areas. After that, we will talk a little bit more specifically about the student experience at SCADS and then the faculty industry experience. We'll cover the benefits of participation, and we will close out our presentation with how to apply. Throughout the presentation, we welcome your questions, but we will leave time at the end specifically for Q&A, so please feel free to submit those, and we will show you about that on the next slide. Yes, so this webinar is being recorded, and we will distribute the recording both on our website, and you will get an email if you have registered for this with a link to the recording once it's processed. You'll see in the bottom of your Zoom webinar a toolbar that also has a Q&A feature. If you could use that to submit your questions, we will be checking that throughout the presentation. So if it's something that fits with what we're talking about, we might be able to address it live, or at the very least, we will be sure to address other questions at the very end of our presentation. But feel free to submit those as we're talking if something comes to mind. And again, if you're watching the recording of this presentation, you can always reach out to us at scads-apply@ncsu.edu. All right, we can go to that next one now. Thank you. So, overview of the Laboratory for Analytic Sciences. The Laboratory for Analytic Sciences, we are the host for SCADS. We are situated at NC State on Centennial Campus, and we are currently in our 16th year of working on projects collaboratively between government, academia, and industry to address national security challenges. This has taken, as you can imagine, a lot of different forms and shapes over the past 13 years. But we have been proud for the diversity of collaborators that we've had and the amount of work that we've been able to cover. So if this is intriguing to you, I'd encourage you to take a look at our website, ncsu-las.org, and you can see more about our year-long efforts and the trajectory of work and even more ways to get involved with us. So let's go ahead to the next slide. A quick overview of SCADS. So the Summer Conference on Applied Data Science, we are seeking to approach a multi-year research challenge using data science methods, a variety of different data science methods, and we'll tell you more about what is of interest specifically for 2026. We are engaging with graduate students, faculty, industry, and government researchers and analysts who all work together and are usually co-located. Hopefully, we're able to get back to being all together again for 2026. And we are working together for 8 weeks during the summer. This year, that'll be between Monday, June 1st through Friday, July 24th, with a few breaks for holidays in there. And you can feel free to reach out to us if you have more specific questions about the dates and the engagement. And like I've said, we are all together on campus at NC State's campus in Raleigh, North Carolina. I see that a question came in, and I can address that aligned with this slide. So a few things that we wanted to highlight up front to make sure that you are spending your time well in this webinar. We wanted to go ahead and review our eligibility criteria because there are some differences here for 2026. First is that U.S. citizenship is required for all attendees. If you have dual citizenship, you can reach out to us. There are a few nuances there that we can help clarify. If you are applying as a graduate student, you must be currently enrolled in a master's or PhD program. We'll go back to that slide, please. Thank you. So if you're applying as a graduate student, you must be currently enrolled in a master's or PhD program. It doesn't matter what program it is, we accept students from all different disciplinary backgrounds. If you're applying in our faculty staff or our faculty industry track, we'd ask that you're affiliated with a current academic institution or currently employed as an industry professional. All attendees should plan on being in person in Raleigh, North Carolina for the 8-week program with limited exceptions on a case-by-case basis. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Stephen, to cover our research goals.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to turn on my video as well. Yep. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Christine. So you may be interested to know when you come to SCADS what you'll be working on. As Christine mentioned, our lab exists at the juncture of academia, industry, and the government. And for us, the government often means the intelligence community. And our primary objective is optimizing and evaluating AI solutions for that community. That means we are trying to find a balance between what can be done in the real world or the non-government world, I guess, and what can be done on intelligence community infrastructure and problems in a way that is trustworthy and human-centered. And our 2026 goals are aligned around that. Okay, so for 2026, we have 5 focus areas. I'm going to talk about each of these in turn, but just as a quick overview, the first 2 are more on AI and how well it's doing and how well it can do, the evaluation of AI and implementation of AI. The second 2, which we'll talk about next, are about the mission focus areas, so why we want to use this AI. And typically, as I said, we consider our customer the intelligence community. So how we can best use AI for the intelligence community. And then finally, our last category is about how do we operate a summer research program where we need to keep everything at the unclassified level and we may not have the perfect data set for everything we want to do. So I'll talk about each of these 5 in turn. Hopefully they sound interesting to you. So the first one is AI evaluation, as I mentioned. So this is the systematic measurement of AI models. This can encompass a lot of different types of projects. So I'll put a few on the board. This could be designing benchmarks for AI models or test sets, or how is this AI model doing against this particular set of problems? Sometimes that might mean abstracting a task that we have in another arena in the intelligence community for something that we want to do at SCADS. This would involve the grading and scoring methods and figuring out what happens when the model fails. Does it report that it fails? Things like that. And finally, of course, adding AI agents into the mix makes everything more complicated, makes everything more nuanced. And in particular, often the grader of the AI model is another AI model. And so you can think even as the benchmarking as an agentic infrastructure itself, because you're asking a model, did this other model get the answer right? So there's a lot of interesting research problems there. A lot of people are working in this area. We're, of course, interested in this in conjunction with our second set of 2 research areas that I'm going to talk about in a second. But the idea here is that we're trying to advance reproducible evaluation frameworks for AI systems. Second, we have an implementation focus. So you can see this bridge here of bees. We're trying to bridge from the outside world to government intelligence community problems. And that is not always a obvious thing or an obvious path to do. But we want to enable the efficient deployment of models in circumstances where we may not have all the resources we need. Resources could be compute resources, or they could be the human's time. And so some of these projects, the one that's most focused on the next 2 research areas is the distillation of large amounts of data for human consumption. As I mentioned, all of our AI solutions have a human in the loop. Because this is intelligence work, we need to have a human making decisions. And how do you distill a huge amount of data down for a human? But we're also talking about the AI models themselves, reducing them for model size, footprint, power consumption, to be able to be run on hardware that the government has. And you look at the bottom, even looking at this deploying quantized models, maybe trying to get by with an 8-bit floating point where you have a 32-bit floating point. things like that. That's our second. So now we'll move into the next. Oh, I'm sorry. The eventual goal here is to bridge the AI that's being done with what we can do for to serve the intelligence community. So now I'm going to move to our second set of two areas, which are focused on our mission customers. So the first of these is intelligence community focused AI agent development. So we have a lot of intelligence analysts who have very complicated jobs where the human has to remain in the loop. And we would like to create AI agents that help them with their work. So, obviously we're all using things like ChatGPT or Claude Code or various tools that help us with our job. Intelligence analysts are no different, but their needs are different in some sense because of the type of work that they do. So, but what we'd like to do is create AI agents that fit the intelligence analysis workflow. So planning, executing, monitoring, revising, all these analytic actions that you have to do when you're creating an analytic case in your work, we would like AI agents to help with those activities, but in such a way that the human remains the decision maker. Obviously, this is a huge task because you're really balancing the autonomy in an arena where that autonomy is of enormous importance. And so you want to make sure you get it right. We have one problem that's kind of an example of this, and that is what we're calling sense making for large entities. More and more, we're trying to understand huge amounts of data, huge groups of people, huge groups of things. And we need to somehow make sense of that at the human level. You could think of this as, say, let's say someone asks you to characterize the collaboration network of all academics. So you go to archive, you look at all the papers. Obviously a human can't digest that amount of material. Um, but we would like to have an AI system digest and represent that amount of material such that a human could digest it. That's just an example, not necessarily the example that's of interest to the intelligence community, of course, but it's an example of the scale issues that we might confront when looking at very large non-atomic organizations. So this could involve using AI with graph construction, say, visualization techniques, summarization across different scales of data. And of course, again, we would want to keep the human in the loop. The human should be able to ask questions of this, should be able to say, well, I'd like to learn more about this part. And can you explain to me this relationship or this group of relationships? Things like that. Um, and the end goal here is we want to help the intelligence community in general reason about very complex things. The fifth category uh, is a support for the other four categories. So as we've said, SCADS is a summer research opportunity for those who may not hold clearances. And so we need to do all of our activities in an arena where you don't need a clearance. Now, we're interested in serving the intelligence community, but we may not have access to the data that the intelligence community uses. So we've had very good success with projects where someone has a project idea. They might not have the perfect data set, but they may have an idea of how to create the perfect data set. And so sometimes that can be a very good side project or even main project for someone who wants to enable another AI project. Um, Sometimes we can use analogs of what we're interested in. Sometimes we have to use synthetic data. Sometimes we have to curate a data set that exists, but maybe is not exactly what we want. Again, the goal of this research area is to enable the other four research areas, but it tends to be a very interesting area in and of itself. Here's a little graphic that shows how these areas interact. Obviously, we need to be able to evaluate AI to make sure that it's reliable and it's giving the human trustworthy information, but at a scale that we can actually implement. And then to study that, we're going to focus specifically on the intelligence community and agentic intelligence analyst work. And in particular, we're going to focus on the specific application of can we reason about very complex data, very large organizations, non-atomic entities, things of that nature. And then underpinning all of this is do we have the right data sets to study these things? So that's a very brief overview of what we anticipate the work will be this summer. I have not gotten into any of the minutia of what a project would be exactly, but you probably can imagine some of the projects you might work on. But these are the big picture areas that we anticipate having projects in this summer. And with that, I will hand it back to Christine.
All right. Thank you, Stephen, for providing that overview. So to look a bit more closely at our schedule and what you can expect when you come to SCADS for the 8 weeks, we actually kick off in May, just a little bit before our 8 weeks formally start, giving you a virtual onboarding. Here we are just trying to get you oriented, maybe introduce you again to some of the problems, the topic areas, but also maybe some of the leaders who are going to be problem champions or taking leadership within those research areas to start to do some of that ideation and team formation before you even arrive on campus. We also cover some logistics there during the virtual onboarding just to make things a bit smoother when you show up for your first day. In June and July, we'll be doing the 8 weeks of our conference. Starting within week one, there are going to be a ton of introductory talks, lots of collaboration and team formation. Past participants usually describe this to us as drinking from a fire hose. So you're going to get a ton of information, meet a ton of new people, and start to form all of those ideas and connections into project teams to work in for the rest of the summer. In weeks 2 through 7, here you're really digging in and getting into the work, into the research, into the prototyping. We support doing this very iteratively and very collaboratively. So that means you can try out an idea for a couple weeks, then try out another idea, build upon it, go a different direction. We are kind of flexible in taking multiple stabs at a problem as long as they are building toward something as your final product. So a lot of collaboration and independent work is also happening during this time. At the end of week 7 and headed into week 8, we start to switch our focus over more strongly toward documentation. So during week 8, we ask all of the project teams to present and share out with each other so that we can have that sense of what people achieved over the summer. All projects also produce a final report. So during week 7 and week 8, you're doing a lot of work on that final report and documenting your results. So in week 8, we're also, celebrating what was achieved, engaging with our stakeholders, and wrapping up our summer conference. In August, if there's some final documentation cleanup that needs to be done, that can be done remotely. And also in August, for our cleared government invitees, there is usually some follow-on work where we do some high side implementation of the different ideas that have been generated. And we'll go to the next slide. Looking a bit more closely at weeks 2 through 7. So what does it look like when you're in that phase of really digging in, getting to do the work of being at SCADS? Our expectations are that most people are in person during the day on campus. We reserve several rooms on campus that have desks set up there, but there are also individual workspaces in the library or in adjacent buildings if you need some focus time, need to get away from the hustle and bustle a little bit. During the day, we bring in a lot of visitors, visiting experts or guest speakers, even folks from our stakeholder community. So it's possible you might be attending a talk. You might be giving a short talk at our bowl sessions. During bowl sessions, we bring everyone together to exchange and get feedback on ideas. Or you might be attending or leading a learning session. So over the years, our attendees have found it helpful to kind of self-organize around topics of interest and to do brown bags, to exchange ideas, or simply to have a reading group and all agree to read papers related to a certain topic and share knowledge over the course of the summer. In addition to that, you'll probably have some either small group meetings, maybe with your project team or with the larger set of projects that might be working on something similar. Maybe you're cross-pollinating a little bit and lending some of your technical expertise to another project. And of course, you'll also be doing your own individual technical work during the day. If you're a student, you might have a mentor and be meeting with your mentor, and everyone might be taking some time to engage more specifically with stakeholders. And then finally, we have usually traditionally had optional self-organized social events in the evening. So it's good to not just work together, but take some time outside of the office to socialize, to network, to get to know who your fellow attendees are. We'll usually set up a couple of those in the beginning, and then turn that over to our group of attendees to figure out what is interesting to them, what they want to do, and what kind of social events that they want to plan. And I will now hand it over to Matt to talk a little bit more about attendee expectations.
Thanks, Christine. So Christine kind of covered a lot of what you can expect as a SCADS attendee. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what we, as the hosts of the conference, expect of our attendees. So, as mentioned a couple times, the SCADS conference is an in-person conference held in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we do expect that the attendees are able to be present and in person for the duration of the conference. Now, we're aware that there will be things that come up during the summer that may take you away for a day or two, and that's something that we would appreciate if you could make clear in your submission and your application, because that is something we do want to prioritize people who can be in person for the most amount of time during the 8 weeks. Um, Now, while you're working on things in person, hopefully you're able to collaborate with the other attendees. And that's something that we're trying to encourage is making sure that that collaborative work does align with the different research and development efforts that Stephen presented. Um, there will be work going on to make sure that the different projects do align with those research goals, and it's not going to be entirely a open selection as to what people are working on. We do want to make sure that things and projects align with the goals of the conference. At the end of the conference, we are hoping that every project will be able to document their work either or both in a technical report at the end of the conference as well as presentations to other attendees. That's things that we're expecting by the end of the conference, but also, as Christine mentioned, we do expect attendees to present their work throughout the duration of the conference as well. And then we expect attendees to make use of the opportunity to engage with the other attendees. So we do want people to engage with the other participants, and it's not really it's not really an expectation that you're going to come here for 8 weeks, work on your own project, and never really talk to anybody. We're hoping that the projects and the teams that are formed are collaborative, that involve attendees, whether they are students, faculty, industry, or government participants, in a very collaborative fashion. Okay. Next slide. So what does that mean for the people on this call? What are the different types of roles that you might fill? So for our student applicants, usually student roles are contributing to different projects, right? They are working on the research projects at the event, similar to how they would work on research projects at as part of their graduate program. They are taking the opportunity to learn new skills, uh, things that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily focused on for their dissertation research, but are relevant and potentially applicable both to their graduate career, but also, as I mentioned, the research areas that Stephen has focused on. For the faculty and industry attendees, we are going to be asking you to be involved in the leadership of these projects, so helping set the direction for what approaches might be taken, use best practices, things like that, and really sort of lead the small teams and the project teams towards the beneficial outcomes. We expect that they're able to contribute some level of subject matter expertise on a relevant area, right? So we want to engage people who can bring their expertise, but also learn from others that are here as part of the conference. And then we do ask our faculty and industry attendees to serve as mentors for our students, student attendees, and some of the early career participants. So leveraging their experience, leveraging their expertise to help guide not only the work that's going on at SCADS, but also work that may go on during the future. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Christine.
Thanks, Matt. And just to follow on off of that, we can cover a few of the benefits of participation. So for both students and faculty industry, we are offering a stipend to support your time engaging with us for the 8 weeks over the summer. For students, you can see on the slide, your stipend amount is 11,500, and for faculty or industry, your stipend is 24,000. Although we do want to note that that might work differently depending on if you are an academic 9-month employee or a 12-month employee. If you have further questions about that, feel free to reach out to us at SCADS-apply and we can help clarify for your situation. For both students and faculty and industry, if you are located further than 35 miles away from Raleigh, North Carolina, then we can provide support for your lodging in Raleigh and also funds to support your travel to and from SCADS. So to Raleigh at the beginning of SCADS and then back home, wherever that is for you, at the end of SCADS. And finally, as you've heard from our descriptions of the program and how it works, we anticipate some benefits to your professional advancement in terms of working collaboratively and in an environment that is encouraging rapid ideation and iteration, expanding your network, getting to interact with a diverse set of experts, but also folks from across academia, industry, and government. And getting to work alongside practitioners of intelligence analysis, which means that you might be able to see more direct application and benefit to end users than in some other situations where you might be working. We'll go on to the next slide. All right, so we're going to close out our presentation by talking about how to apply. And the first thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is to visit our website, ncsu-las.org/SCADS, to learn more about our 2026 research goals. If you go to our website, you're going to see a PDF document. If you scroll down about a third of the way, you can see a link out to that where you can read in more detail about all of the areas that Stephen just described. And I'd encourage you to take a look at that because that is a lot of the content that we're looking for in your application. We're looking for interests and connection to those areas. And so grounding your responses in that makes you a very competitive applicant from our perspective. So after doing your background research, learning about those different areas and finding your alignment, you can complete the online application at go.ncsu.edu/scads-apply. That will take you to a Qualtrics form, and you can select the attendee type that best matches with you, and that will show you the questions for your application. The deadline for these applications is midnight on February 12th. Just to briefly describe the materials that we require in that application, we ask you for responses to 4 short answer questions. We also ask for a resume or CV. We don't have a preference for one over the other. You are free to submit whichever best represents your experience and your alignment with the SCADS areas. And then for student applicants, we also ask for contact information for one reference who will provide a recommendation. For student applicants, we'll ask you this in a specific section of the application where you will enter in their email address. And as soon as you submit your application, that's going to trigger an automatic email to your reference so that they can complete their recommendation form for you. So it's not a formal letter of recommendation. Instead, we're asking your reference to answer a couple short answer questions to help us make the determination about how well suited you are for this experience. So students, be sure to submit your application early because we ask for completed applications by midnight on February 12th. So your reference should plan to submit their recommendation also by that same deadline. So make sure that you're giving them enough time to be thoughtful and to write out a strong recommendation for you. Let's go on to the next slide, please. After you've submitted your application, we anticipate extending virtual interview invitations in late February. These are 30-minute interviews where you'll talk with a couple of the members of our team with further questions about your interests and experiences relevant to SCADS. And then we conclude our process by extending offers in early March so we can begin onboarding and get you all set up in time for participating in SCADS with our virtual onboarding in May. And with that, we will switch over to and use the rest of our time for Q&A. I can see that a couple have come up in the chat, and I think we've been typing answers, but I'll look to my other colleagues on the call to see if there are any of those that we want to answer aloud right now.
Christine, there was one question about whether someone who has finished their master's degree but hasn't started their PhD, whether they would have to wait until next year to apply. Do we want to clarify that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I might need a little bit more detail on to figure out what your specific situation is for the person who asked this, just regarding your timeline. Are you admitted in your new PhD program? Are you finishing your master's this semester? So I might request just a little bit more background information to help make the final determination. But if you are currently in a master's program and finishing that degree, then in May, let's say, then you are still eligible to apply. I hope that helps a little bit, and I hope that is applicable to this situation. Okay, I can see
Uh,
the yeah. Sorry, go
I was
ahead.
just going to raise the question about whether this year everyone would be at NC State, including the government participants, or if there would be a split conference where some people are at NC State and some people are not. Uh, Steve and Christine, do either of you want to
Yeah,
answer that?
so the question is whether everyone would be in Raleigh. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That is our intent. Obviously, the last year was kind of a strange year in terms of government funding, and but we anticipate this year being a little bit more normal year and everyone being able to travel to Raleigh on the government side as well. That is our hope and our belief.
Awesome. And then the last question would be for you, Christine. If someone is recently graduated with their PhD, are they eligible to apply for a student position?
Again, I feel that this is one where I need a little bit more information. So I would ask that this attendee reach out to me at scads-apply@ncsu.edu so that we can sort out where you are in your timeline of graduating and moving on to your next role.
Okay. And I think that covers all of the open questions.
Excellent. All right. Well, then, thank you everyone very much for joining today. If you have additional questions, you're always welcome to reach us at scads-apply@ncsu.edu. And again, this webinar has been recorded and we will be distributing the recording as soon as it's processed. So if you're on here watching live, then you will get an email with the link to the webinar, and it will also be posted on our website after it's processed. I saw one more question come in. Let
Yeah,
me
the
see.
question is it possible for researchers from outside USA to apply? So I assume you're asking about a US citizen that happens to be studying abroad at this point?
Um, I don't think that we quite got to an answer there. So, US citizenship is required to apply for this. But if you are a US citizen outside of the US, then Matt, can you weigh in on how we might deal with that situation?
Right. If you're a U.S. citizen who is outside the U.S. currently, but would be able to be in person in Raleigh, North Carolina for the conference, I think that would be acceptable. Um, but again, we can work through specific use cases better if you want to follow up.
Thank you. All right. So with that, if there are further questions, I'm going to direct you to scads-apply at ncsu.edu. And thank you all for spending a bit of your afternoon with us, and we hope to see your applications.